Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. I'm Heena Goswami, Editorial Consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. The Israel-Hamas conflict that erupted this year on October 7, as Hamas led an armed attack on Israel, continues till date and has led to the death of around 1,500 Israelis and over 20,000 Palestinians. As Israel continues to exact revenge and attack Gaza, there seems no end in sight to this genocide. To understand the genesis of Israel-Palestine conflict and the ongoing humanitarian crisis, we have with us Dr. Muddassir Quamar. Dr. Muddassir Quamar is an associate professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He was previously an associate fellow with the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, New Delhi. Welcome to IGPP Expert Talks, sir.
Thank you.
So, what is the genesis of Israel-Palestine conflict? What led to the Hamas attack on Israel? Like, what is the situation like? Are there any other political actors in Palestine who do not support this attack by Hamas? Let's go back into the history and tell us about this conflict.
See, if one looks at the genesis, one can go back up to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. But the contemporary contemporary conflict goes back to the end of the Ottoman Empire, and basically the Jewish aspiration for a national home or for a state of their own. And it is during this interwar period that the two national aspirations of the Jewish Zionist aspiration for Israel, state of Israel, and the Palestinian aspirations during Mandate Palestine for a Palestinian state of their own. So basically, this clash of two nationalisms, the Jewish nationalism, which can be construed as Zionism, and the Palestinian nationalism. It is this clash of two nationalisms that can be the genesis of, or that should be seen as the genesis of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine, and Hamas is part of one of the factions of the Palestinian, territory of Palestinian people.
Are there any other political actors who wouldn't have supported this act?
See, if you look at the Palestinians, they are divided into several factions. Hamas is a faction which is Islamist, and by Islamist I mean a group of people who aspire for a establishment of a Islamic state, not necessarily a secular state. They are a branch of the broader organization called Muslim Brotherhood, which is well known, which has its origin in Egypt and which has its branches in several parts of what we call as West Asia, North Africa, or the Middle East region. And there are several other factions. For example, Fatah is a faction which has given up arms resistance. There are other factions such as Islamic Jihad, which is another more radical faction, which has also not given arms struggle. And there are many other several smaller groups. If you look at the current situation of the Palestinians, they are divided into two main territory and two main factions. One is the West Bank and one is Gaza. Gaza is controlled by Hamas since 2006, when it had won an election, and even after election, it did not really, the power transition did not happen smoothly. There was a intra-Palestinian fight, a civil war kind, that erupted in 2006-7, and eventually Hamas took control of Gaza, while the Palestinian Authority, which is in a way internationally recognized body for governing and not controlling, but governing and let's say negotiating with the outside world, the Palestinian Authority, which is currently headed by Mahmoud Abbas, who is the president of the Palestinian Authority. So there are many factions. Certainly, most of the Palestinian factions have given up arms resistance. They call for negotiations and talks to resolve the conflict or to end the conflict. Uh, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are two factions who have not given up arms resistance, and they also do not recognize Israel. They call for restoration of a Palestinian state on the Mandate Palestine territory, which was under British mandate, and the territory which was the Wilayat Palestine during the Ottoman period.
Middle East has been a volatile region for some time now, but of recent there was, a peace treaty that was negotiated between Saudi Arabia and Iran under the edges of China. There were also talks of a treaty being negotiated between Israel and Saudi Arabia, right? So, does the outbreak of conflict and the horrors that have been inflicted by both sides, does that mean that the hope for peace in Middle East is vanquished for now?
The Middle East region is a very fragile region. It's also a very complex region. If you look at the regional architecture, regional order, it has always been dominated by external power. Currently, it is the United States. During Cold War, it was a struggle between, or it was a competition between the United States and the USSR, the Soviet Union, and that led to constant squabbling and fighting and conflicts and all that. If you look at today, the United States has slightly been trying to reduce its involvement in the region politically. And gradually, what has happened is the region has seen a situation where several regional powers have emerged. That includes Saudi Arabia, Iran, Israel, Turkey, and Israel. These are all, Israel is a small state in terms of territory but militarily strong. Others are big countries. Egypt at one point used to be a powerful leading Arab country. It is no longer a very strong, powerful country. It remains important in the region. But if one looks at the regional order, it is these 4 or 5 countries which are important, which have been dominating the regional situation. If you look at Iran, it has established the axis of resistance, which threatens many regional countries, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, the smaller Gulf states like UAE and Bahrain. Turkey-Iran relations also have been very, I would say, complicated. They have never been very friends. There are historical reasons for it. Coming back to the vulnerability and complexity of the situation, the region, it would be very difficult to suggest that there would not be any peace in the Middle East. See, if you look at the current situation, it is Israel and Palestine, one faction of Palestinians, which is fighting. But certainly, with the degree of death and destruction, it has been quite high. But if you look at going back to the last decade, the decades since Arab Spring protests, many of the regional countries have been affected. There have been civil wars. So, a process of rapprochement which had started with the Abraham Accords and the Iran and Saudi Arabia agreeing to restore their diplomatic relations, which had derailed in 2016. A process had started which had generated some hope. In my opinion, this is my personal understanding, the current conflict has not derailed the process of rapprochement. It is, uh, I would say, it's a temporary, you know, uh, derailment of the situation. Once the Israelis and Palestinians come back to some kind of sanity, we'll see that the process of rapprochement will continue.
Western nations have vouched support for Israel, and they have dispatched military and aid. not just humanitarian but military aid for Israel. And Israel is already a militarily strong nation, right? While most nations of the global south have condemned aggression by Israel. So, does this conflict also make clear the fault lines between global south and global north? And is it even justified for Western nations to send military aid to Israel when it's in an already, strong position, while even humanitarian aid for Palestine has been sparse?
There are two, three aspects to this point. One is is there any clear division between the global north and global south? I wouldn't put it that way because of very simple reason that there are, there is uneasiness even in the north, in the Western countries, about the continuity of the current conflict. I mean, no country, including in the United States, wants this conflict, the current war between Israel and Hamas to continue. It's a disastrous conflict for the region, for the Israelis, for the Palestinians, and for the whole global economy, politics, and so on. And even if you look at the global south, countries like India or even several other countries, they have not really taken a stand where they are just supporting one side and not supporting the other side. For example, India condemned the attack by Hamas on October 7th, but has since then also been counseling the parties involved to resolve the conflict and not, continue to continue in the war. Now, if one looks at the uh, issues, the final issues as far as this conflict is concerned, basically is what Israelis and what the current Israeli government is insisting, the Israeli military is insisting, is the release of all the hostages taken by Hamas. While Hamas has also put a lot of demands in terms of prisoner swap, in terms of end of the siege on Gaza, and so on. So let's see how it proceeds. It would be very difficult to suggest that things will proceed this way or that way. One cannot be sure. On the part of on the point about the aid to Israel, the military aid or any other kind of aid, support to Israel, political support to Israel, and the lack of support or any kind of humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Humanitarian assistance is being done, but the problem is that it is under siege and Israel is right now not really ready to, including even Egypt, for example, is not really very keen because of security issues. So that is certainly a concern. Regarding support for Israel, the United States has always, supported Israel. The U.S. commitment to Israeli security is is at a very high level, and there is no denying the fact that if Israel's security is under question, U.S. will support it, will do all necessary steps, will take all necessary steps to ensure that its security is not compromised.
Coming to India, India has always stood by the two nation theory, but of late it has grown close to US and other Western nations. Do you think this conflict would have any bearing upon India's relations with the Middle East or its Western allies?
Actually, in India in 1947, when the United Nations, when the Resolution 181 was passed, India actually did not vote for the partition plan, which was passed. India voted for a federal plan, which meant that there would be one state with two it would be a federal state with two, Palestinian Israelis living in the same state. But that was not to be. I mean, that plan actually, the Indian plan was actually rejected by both Israelis and Palestinians, or at that time Arabs, because Palestinians at that time had not really become Palestinians the way we understand it today. Now, as far as relations with India is concerned, yes, if you look at India's relations with the Israelis and Palestinians have evolved over a period of time. If you look at until 1992, India did not even have formal diplomatic relations with Israel. And India always sided with the Arabs, and then later on, from 1970s onwards, once the Palestinians became emerged as the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian themselves, the Palestinian Liberation Organization led by Yasser Arafat, India largely supported the PLO. India was one of the first non-Arab countries to actually to recognize PLO as a sole representative. Then representative office was given to PLO and all that. Uh, since the establishment of diplomatic relations with Israel, things have really gone into a direction where you can say that India has tried to balance its relations with Israel and with the Palestinians. And then there has been a gradual dehyphenation. This dehyphenation goes back to early 2000s, or one can say that late 1990s, but it has become very defined during the Prime Minister Modi's government. And despite of the conflict, if you look at it, India's relations with Israel are very strong, very multifaceted, based on defense relations, science and technology, agriculture, water, and you name it. When it comes to Palestinians, India has always reiterated its position that it supports the formation of a Palestinian state, which means ending of the Israeli occupation of the occupied territories, the West Bank and the Gaza. But it is easier said than done in the sense that it's a very complex issue. But as far as India's stand are concerned, it is dehyphenated. There are relations with Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority. India does not have any political, economic, or diplomatic engagement with Hamas, and it has very good relations with Israel. So, in my opinion, this the ongoing conflict is unlikely to have any serious rethink in India's position on the Israel and Palestine conflict.
Despite the UN Secretary General's repeated pleas, and there have been no efforts by world powers to end the violence being inflicted upon the people of Gaza, and the motion for humanitarian ceasefire was also thwarted, right? UN has failed to stop what is the crisis that is unfolding in Gaza now. It also failed to stop the war in Ukraine. What does this mean? Like, are multilateral institutions or the aspirations for world government through an institution like UN, is that have they lost its relevance?
Multilateralism has its advantages, in the sense that, especially when it comes to setting of norms for variety of issues, let's say climate change or many other issues, carbon footprints, regional, security, shipping, maritime security, many issues, and states can sit together, negotiate, come to a decision which is based on consensus. When it comes to contentious issues, multilateralism has never been very successful. Right from the beginning of the United Nations, League of Nations actually could not prevent the wars. The United Nations has never been able to actually prevent any war from happening or resolve stop any of the war while it is ongoing, whether it is Ukraine, whether it was the Kuwait crisis in 1991, the US attack on Iraq in 2003, the conflict in Libya, all conflicts that happened in the Arab Spring. So it has its limitations. To expect UN-led or multilateral-led governance to have an overarching impact on the world would also mean compromising the sovereignty of states. And if this one of the most basic aspects of international relations is, or international politics, international studies is, the states have sovereignty, and nobody wants to give up sovereignty. I mean, no state would want to give up sovereignty. So that is where the limitations are. So conflicts, when they happen, it's very difficult for the United Nations, especially when powerful states are involved. For example, if you look at the current situation, the US is on the side of Israel. It has a certain commitment as far as a strategic partnership between Israel and the United States are concerned. So it has a commitment, and it does not really want to compromise on that. So such in such circumstances, or for that matter, the Ukraine Russia-Ukraine conflict, because Russia is involved, it will veto anything which goes against Russian interest. Similarly, if any US interest is involved, the United States will veto. Or if China is involved, it will veto any security, UN Security Council veto resolution that goes against its interest. So it's very difficult when it comes to conflicts, and it's very difficult when it comes to involvement of powerful nations, superpowers.
American Senator Lindsey Graham called this conflict a religious war. Now, I have two questions. Is that an assertion that you would agree with? And is that how the conflict is being perceived now by majority of people who might miss the nuances and the complexities? And while the horrors inflicted by both sides cannot be forgotten for a very long time, what can be the possible way forward?
First of all, I would disagree with the definition of this being a religious war. Just like I would not agree with the assertion about clash of civilizations. Uh, there are religious elements to the conflict, no denying that fact. Both sides, whether the Jewish aspiration for a Zionist state or for revival of the state of Israel, or whether the Palestinian assertion on this being a Palestinian state and their right on Jerusalem. So if you look at Jerusalem, the city, the old city of Jerusalem, the eastern Jerusalem, it is holy for three religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And all three have certain assertions. It is Jerusalem as a city hosts or has the Western Wall, the ruins of the Second Temple, which is the holiest of the holy site as far as the Jewish population in the world is concerned. And it also has the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of Ra, which is the third holiest site in Islam. So yes, there are religious aspect to it. There are religious groups on both sides who have taken lead in terms of for politics. For example, Hamas is an Islamist organization. Current Most of the current governments in Israel in recent times have been very right wing. The current Israeli government is one of the most right wing governments in Israeli history since 1948. So there are religious components to the conflict. Both sides use religious symbolisms, religious language to assert their rights and to mobilize support. Uh, but that is not the only aspect. As I said in the beginning, the genesis of the conflict is basically uh, based on two nationalisms, which were largely secular in nature when they started. And the third aspect, which is also very important, is the territory. It's a small territory which both sides claim. Until unless there is some kind of and I'm coming to the point about what could be the way forward. Until and unless both sides agree on some kind of a compromise to share the territory, which is currently what Israel proper is, and then the West Bank, Gaza, and the Jerusalem. the occupied territories. Until unless there is a compromise and understanding on part of the Israelis and Palestinians themselves. Third parties, they have been trying to resolve the conflict, maybe through mediation and whatnot. They have not been successful. So until unless there is a degree of understanding and recognition that they need to end the conflict, both sides, I don't really see this conflict ending anytime soon. The war may end. The ongoing war between Israel and Hamas might end uh, in the sense that if they agree on release of hostages, there might be some prisoner swap as earlier. There might be some new system of governance as far as Gaza is concerned. Hamas leadership, Hamas members might go underground or might leave the territory, Palestinian territory. But it is for the people of Israel and for the people of Palestine to really, understand that. And once they agree on ending the conflict, before that, I don't really see any hope for the end of the conflict.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we do hope that the war comes to an end at the earliest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.